A very good friend of mine, when he started out in engineering in the mid-1970s, he worked with two men who were part of the Philadelphia experiment. And these men were basically under non-disclosure agreements under threat of death, basically. But they became close enough friends and trusted each other that they told my friend about what went on in the Philadelphia Naval Yard 30 years before. Because when my friend was working with them, it had only been 30 years, 35 years since the Philadelphia Naval Yard experiment. The United States Navy took the Eldridge, which was a U.S. Navy warship, full-size warship, with several dozen men on it. I don't know how many dozen, but a crew of men. And they filled this thing up with vacuum tubes and ran a cable out to it. They created the largest modern electromagnetic field that had ever been created up to that point in time. The object of the experiment was to make the ship invisible to radar. Well, it not only made it invisible to radar, it made it invisible. It made it go someplace else instantly. It went to another port hundreds of miles away and came back. And when it came back, the men, some of them had pieces of their body stuck in the steel. All of them had severe psychological problems, and one or two of them were gone. Just the men who survived spent the rest of their natural lives in psychiatric wards, apparently. And there's what we believe happened is the ship not only traveled in a distance, it also traveled in time. The men came back talking about televisions that had screens 4 feet wide. Of course, the TV screen in 1943 was 6 inches wide. And other things that they saw while they were gone that did not exist for 40 years in the future. Now, the U.S. Navy stumbled upon that technology inadvertently in 1943. Once that's happened, of course, they're not about to walk away from it. Fast forward about 40 years to Texas and the superconducting supercollider. They built the world's largest machine, literally the world's largest machine, to create the world's largest electromagnetic field. And allegedly to get subatomic particles spinning on this 23 or however many miles diameter circle in opposite directions so they would hit each other and they could take pictures. I'm serious. That's what they told the public. I mean, it stretches credibility. My inside information, Diane, is that when they announced they were mothballing this place, that they still had more PhD physicists working there than any place on Earth. It's probably still in operation. They've built a new one, of course, in Switzerland. Basically the same thing, maybe not quite as big, to allegedly do the same thing. Get subatomic particles spinning in opposite directions so they can hit and take pictures of them. So I don't know about a portal in the Gulf of Aden. I do know that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. government has been working diligently on these things since 1943 in an attempt to have a way to create and control these events as opposed to having them in out-of-control matter that happens that they can't quite figure out why it's going on or how to control it. They're probably at a point where they can do it. Of course, it's highly classified. I don't know what they've accomplished.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Okay. I just watched the second Philadelphia Experiment 2 the other night, by the way. Now that's pure fiction there, I hope anyway. But it's a good film.
It was done with a lower budget, I think, as well. John, Robert Felix's work shows periodic, approximately 11,500 year periods of magnetic wandering or reversals, as well as ice ages. His research has also found scientific evidence showing that oceans actually retreat from the coasts and not submerge the coasts, as the waters freeze to form the massive ice on the continents. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility, and we have evidence of these continents being washed over with waves. If you go out to these big flat rocks out in Arizona, we call them mesas, you'll find seashells on top of the mesas. Plenty of evidence of the oceans being far, far higher, at least for a few days, at least with one big wave, nothing, if not more, in the past. That 11,500 year time frame is kind of interesting for a number of reasons. One of them, of course, is the Black Knight satellite, which scientists estimate has been up for about 12,000 years. The written traditions in India give extensive documentation of machines that fly, atomic weapons, and things that we're only now capable of putting together. If you go to that part of Pakistan, that's Kashmir, where the nice sweater comes from, between Pakistan and India, the local souvenir shops, they sell little trinkets commemorating the nuclear device, or devices, plural, that were set off there 12,000 years ago. If you go to Saudi Arabia, you'll find an area of Saudi Arabia in the desert where there's hundreds of acres of green glass, which before August of 1945, we could not conceive how in the world can the Saudi Arabian desert have the temperature of the surface of the sun, 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what it takes to melt sand and have it turn into glass, 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, how could that possibly happen? Well, we all found out twice in August 1945 in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's lots of evidence of high technology having been on this planet in the distant past. Plenty of evidence. The Black Knight satellite is one of the main parts of that evidence. I've determined to my own satisfaction every U.S. senator is aware of the Black Knight satellite. Probably most of the long-term congressmen, of course, the presidents and vice presidents are. The Black Knight satellite was discovered in 1959, 1960, shortly after the Sputnik and our first satellites went up there. We set up optical and radar tracking stations all over the planet to track these man-made satellites, and they found there was already one up there on a polar orbit. We couldn't do polar orbits for another 30 years. We were only doing equatorial orbits in 1959, 1960. The Black Knight satellite has two nicknames. One, of course, is the Black Knight satellite. The other is the cryogenic box. It became a matter of highest national priority to gain access to the contents of that box up there. Probably by the late 60s with the Apollo space missions, we had enough lift capability to get up that high. It's just below the Van Allen radiation belt, about 22,000 miles high. I know two of its three dimensions, 40 by 70 feet. I don't know the third dimension. Its other nickname is the cryogenic box, which brings up all kinds of questions in and of itself. So you get up there high enough to photograph and measure the docking mechanism. You come back to Earth. You build a docking mechanism. You go back up. You link up. Who wants to be the first one through the door, Jules?
True.
Yeah, right. I mean, how scary would that be? But how exciting. They probably gained access to the contents sometime in the mid to late 70s, and that's just guessing. No doubt whatsoever with the space shuttle and that technology, they've been able to gain access to the contents of the Black Knight satellite, bring it back to Earth, and begin reverse engineering the metallurgy, the electronics, the computers. We don't know, at least I don't know, what they found inside that box, but I have no doubt that they got into it and they started recovering whatever there was to recover from it.
John, do you have a pair of third-generation night vision goggles by any chance?
I've got a night vision scope that's not third gen. I have looked through third gen scopes. It's amazing. You ever look at the sky with one?
Yes, I've seen Ed Grimsley's work, and that's why I was saying, the Black Knight satellite, I believe. There's so many things out there, especially if you look at the night vision goggles, just things zooming around. Who knows what's up there?
Well, if you look at the sky with your naked eye, you'll see stars and then groups of stars, and then you'll see a lot of blank spots where there's nothing. You look at the sky with third-gen night vision, it's stars on top of there are no blank spots. it's like you've never seen the sky before, isn't it, Jules?
That's right. Yeah.
And you don't have to look very long before you start seeing meteorites. Meteorites. I mean,
not meteorites doing right angles, though.
Well, I haven't looked that much through third gen, but there are a lot of meteorites, and there may be things up there that going at right angles also. Is that your observation?
Only from the videos I've seen from other people with night vision goggles. I don't actually have a pair.
Well, it's on my list of things to get, and I'll be looking. So it'll be a fun thing to do.
Great. Thanks, John. We've got a question from Romans.
Hi, John. This is Romans 828 is true, but they call me Romans for short.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us all tonight.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the subject of nuclear reactors, I've got a question and then a follow-up. The Earth changes and failure of the electrical grid could cause most to all nuclear reactors in the U.S. to melt down. We are seeing that possibly with nuclear reactors in Japan. Does nuclear meltdown of all reactors due to these changes concern you?
Not really. We had a caller on my show this morning. He's a nuclear engineer, and he's in charge of a nuclear power plant when he's on duty. It's a very responsible position. These plants, especially the more modern ones, have a lot of redundancy built into them, so that no matter what happens, they have a high likelihood of being able to shut it down in a safe manner. Obviously, a catastrophic event such as a terrorist bomb or somebody crashing a big plane into one would disrupt all the backups and the backups and the backups redundancy that they have. He was telling us, for example, that they keep enough cooling liquid on hand that even if what a tsunami does is suck all the water out of the cooling system before it comes back in as a tidal wave. They have enough extra cooling liquid on hand to safely shut down the power plant. It's not a major concern of mine. It is a concern, but they have a lot of redundancy built into these power plants to shut them down seriously for almost any event that you can think of, other than a group of armed men coming in there with explosive devices or something of that nature that just overrides and wipes out all the redundancy safeguards that they have built in.
I see. Now, concerning your safe area in the Ozarks, do you feel that it's reasonably placed to avoid any potential contamination?
Well, as reasonable as it can be. We're not as safe as the fictitious town of Jericho, Kansas.
Yeah.
There is a nuclear power plant right at the northern edge of the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks in Callaway County, Missouri, at the extreme north edge of the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks. The prevailing winds go east by northeast. Whatever is downwind or upwind from us, I should say, which would be Oklahoma and Texas. I'd have to research it to see what's out that direction. I'm not aware of nuclear power plants being out that way, but there certainly could be some. So it's not a major concern of mine, no, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, John. Obviously, you were discussing earlier that it's hard to tell the timeline between Phase 2 and Phase 3, but what we can do is we can look at what other people are doing. Along with the Navy, other governments, and some Fortune 500 companies, it seems some celebrities are aware